Hello everyone, wherever you are in the world, thank you for joining us today. I'm Dr. Andrew Sharman, President of IOSH, and I'd like to welcome you once again to the latest in our series of COVID-19 webinars. IOSH, the Institution of Occupational Safety and Health, is the chartered body and the world's largest membership organisation for health and safety professionals. Now with over 47,000 members in 130 countries working in nearly every sector. Our vision is a safer, healthier world of work for everyone. These free weekly COVID-19 webinars, which we've run since the beginning of April, focus on gathering to share knowledge, experience and expertise pertinent to occupational safety and health, COVID-19 and safe, healthy, resilient workplaces. Today is the 13th in our series that cover many professional, practical and evidence-based aspects of managing occupational safety and health during the pandemic. And today's session is brought to you in collaboration with key bodies, businesses and professionals concerned with travel and tourism, a global sector hit particularly hard by the COVID-19 pandemic. My reliance on international travel saw me displaced by COVID-19 when it hit the UK. I found myself nearly 2,000 kilometres from my home in Switzerland in holiday accommodation that I'd planned on being in for just a few days, which turned into 3 months in an Airbnb rental apartment. It was at that point that we began to realise just what a shockwave this might cause for international travel and tourism. Prior to the pandemic, my work as a consultant in safety culture and leadership took me around the world most weeks. In fact, in 2019, I worked in more than 58 different countries. And that ability to move seamlessly across borders became vitally useful to me. This emergency has been a stark reminder of how much we take for granted, and I appreciate the safety and comfort travel and tourism professionals excel at providing. The situation remains challenging and uncertain, doesn't it? Rising COVID-19 infection rates in various places around the world continue to cause concern and may cause new travel restrictions, undermining momentum towards reopening tourism across Europe. However, today we have an opportunity, I think, to show how safety and health professionals can enable the industry to restart and to recover. With the right health and safety measures in place, the travel and tourism sector can be a powerful vehicle to drive recovery. So much attention is paid to keeping the public safe and well when they travel, but we know that the foundations of a thriving industry will be healthy employees demonstrating their amazing abilities to serve their customers. So in the next hour, we'll find out how this vast, diverse sector is striving to restart. We'll look into new protocols, hear case studies of challenges and solutions, and survey essential competencies and tools for OSH professionals and business managers to ensure the protection and safety and health of their workforce. Almost 1,000 participants registered ahead of our webinar today, and you represent as many as 50 different nations, maybe more. Interest is clearly high, so let's get started by introducing you to our presenters and their topics. First, from the World Travel and Tourism Council, or WTTC, we're pleased to welcome Vice President of Policy, Tiffany Mizrahi. Tiffany will present on new safe travels, including us to the WTTC's global protocols and the ways forward that they propose. Then IOSH Head of Corporate Engagement, Jonathan Nobbs, will outline essential resources for businesses, including enhanced education, training and professional development that will ensure the protection, safety and health of all workforces wherever they are. Next, Mark Jordan, Group Director of Security, Health and Safety, Crisis and BCM at Tui Group, will reveal how this travel and tourism multinational has designed and is implementing their new normal for safety practices. Arlette Anderson, who's Director of Environment, Safety and Health for a major aviation hub, London Gatwick Airport, will outline COVID-19 OSH protocols there, enabling them to resume safe airport operations. And then finally, Dr. Mark Parrish, Regional Medical Director for the world's largest medical and travel security services firm, International SOS, will take us through new safety procedures, solutions and case studies, allowing us to restart our travels in confidence. Today, our speakers provide us with tremendous knowledge and experience, and I know you'll benefit from hearing what they have to say. Questions and answers will be handled at the end by our panel of presenters together. So please take that opportunity to submit throughout the webinar, and I'll address as many as I can to the panelists on your behalf. Use the Q&A tab to raise your questions. I want to emphasize that this and our other webinars are a platform to inform and engage with safety and health professionals and others responsible for safety and health at work. We want to support you with this regular platform for engagement. It's a two-way channel, giving you the opportunity to share support and guidance on this evolving issue wherever you are and in whichever industry sector you work in. Now more than ever, organizations need authoritative, useful, relevant advice and guidance on managing the safety and health of their workforces. The continuously updated COVID-19 advice and guidance we're producing for IOSH professionals and all organizations on managing the response, keeping staff safe and healthy at work, is available to download for free on IOSH's website, especially at iosh.com/returning safely. So let's begin. Let me welcome from the WTTC, Tiffany Mizrahi. Tiffany, please go ahead and share your screen.
Thank you so much, Andrew. And great. So good afternoon, everybody, and thank you so much for inviting me to take part in this webinar. My name, as mentioned, is Tiffany Mizrahi, and I'm the Vice President of Policy at WTTC. If we can go to the next slide. WTTC represents the global travel and tourism private sector. And for over 30 years, we've conducted research and worked to align the sector to speak with one voice and to ensure fair economic policies and the sector's long-term sustainable and inclusive growth. If we go to the next slide, I wanted to first paint a picture of the performance of the travel and tourism sector before the crisis. The sector accounted for 330 million jobs globally, or 1 in 10 jobs on the planet. The sector also grew faster than the global economy for the 9th consecutive year, with a 3.5% growth in GDP growth of the sector versus 2.5% of the global economy. The sector accounted for 10.3% of global GDP. So if we look at the next slide, the situation has obviously changed. And here are some COVID-19 data points. As of yesterday, there have been 9.2 million reported cases, and the fatality rate on the basis of reported cases is currently estimated at 5.2%. Over 64% of those cases are in 10 countries alone, notably in the US, Italy, Spain, Germany, China, France, Iran, and the UK, I think. No, that has slightly changed. And the outbreak has spread to 188 countries. Well, according to the it took 7 days from the first reported case to reach the first 100,000 cases, 11 days to reach the second 100,000, 4 days for the third 100,000, and just 2 days for the second 100,000. We've had approximately or over 100,000 cases increase now on a daily basis. So next slide. Looking at the potential impact of COVID-19 to date, our latest research at WTTC estimates that up to 121 million travel and tourism jobs and $3.4 trillion loss in travel and tourism GDP are at risk, according to our baseline scenario. In a worst case scenario, where restrictions only ease in September for domestic and November for intercontinental travel, the losses in jobs could reach 197 million jobs and $5.5 trillion loss for the travel and tourism sector, which would mean a 62% reduction from the previous year. Looking at the next slide, we've learned that recovery can be time consuming, but that our sector is resilient. We undertook a big body of research, which we launched in November 2019, on crisis readiness, in which we looked at 4 types of crisis, notably terrorism, natural disasters, geopolitical shocks, and outbreaks. We found that for outbreaks or disease cases, the average recovery time was 19.4 months to pre-crisis arrival levels. What we also found was that the travel and tourism sector is becoming increasingly resilient. Our research across the 4 types of crisis shows that between 2001 and 2018, the months to recover decreased from 26 months on average to 10 months on average. So we're seeing countries learn from their own experiences and those of others, while travelers are also becoming more. So move to the next slide. WTTC has defined 4 principles for the travel and tourism sector's recovery. The first is to have a global, consistent and coordinated approach to reestablish effective operations and reopen borders. The second is to enhance the existing seamless traveler journey by adding health and hygiene components and building in the latest technology. The third, which I will focus on in a moment, is to implement global protocols defined jointly by the travel and tourism private sector, health experts, and the public sector to regain traveler confidence. And the fourth is to continue supporting the travel and tourism sector throughout the recovery with enabling policies and financial aid. So moving on to the next slide, WTTC believes that there's a need for consistency and coordination at the global level to rebuild that confidence with the traveler. It's in that context that we launched the Safe Travel Protocol. Experts, industry associations, and international organizations to help us draft effective recovery protocols to optimize the sector-wide recovery. We already launched 9 protocols across 9 industry verticals to date, notably in hospitality, outdoor retail, aviation, airports, tour operators, MICE, short-term rental attractions, and car rental. The 3 last ones were launched on Tuesday. And we're exploring looking at cruise and insurance as well. The protocols, which are divided into 4 pillars, so focusing on promoting operational and staff preparedness, delivering a safe experience, rebuilding trust and confidence, and implementing enabling policies. As part of the promotion of operational and staff preparedness, there's a significant focus on staff training, but also on getting the workplace ready, something that IOSH is leading on. We're in fact kicking off a collaboration with IOSH, building on IOSH's expertise to support the travel and tourism sector in returning safely to work in all senses of the term. Moving on to the next slide. We've actually gotten a lot of interest in the protocols. In fact, the private sector and destinations alike started asking us for a way to show that they were aligned. And on this basis, we created the stamp. To date, we have, I think, 35 destinations who are using it. So we've been reviewing their protocol. Protocols that we're reviewing to make sure that actually they are aligned with our approach. Our goal is to, if we go to the next slide, our goal is to support the sector to recovery and ensure that travel and tourism has a seat at the table. We believe that there are 4 stages of recovery in crisis management. Restarting, sorry, yeah. Oh, yeah, okay, sorry, I couldn't see the slide. Restarting operation, reaching recovery, and redesigning for the new normal. What we do know is that travel and tourism will be highly dependent on local policies and procedures of destinations across the globe. Some destinations will come back faster than others, and it's likely that domestic will kick off first, followed by regional. Also very likely see an increase in the use of travel insurance and personal travel advisors, particularly for new destinations. And finally, the sector must inspire confidence and put in place protocols to enable that safe travel and that safe return to work. Moving on to the next slide, I'd just like to thank you very much for your time and hope that I have been good with time. Handing back to you, Andrew.
Thank you, Tiffany, for that excellent start. We did have some technical difficulties with Tiffany's wireless connection there, I think, but hopefully you managed to get all of what she was saying. Don't worry, of course, this webinar is available for replay afterwards, and you can also download Tiffany's slides from the IOSH.com website. We'll send you a link to that and all the other resources we share with you today following this webinar. So let's now turn to Jonathan Nobbs, who leads corporate engagement and product development for IOSH. Welcome, Jonathan. Good to have you here. Please share your screen now.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you, Chair, for the introduction. So yes, so without any further ado, 8 minutes and the clock is ticking to give you an update on the products and the resources that we have available that we've been developing at IOSH that can support you through this current position. So So what I'm going to do is really take you through a few things. One of them is to take you through IOSH and what IOSH is, to give you an introduction to that, and then take you through the resources that we have available. I must say it's absolutely fantastic that we're joined by so many our World Travel and Tourism Council stakeholders, IOSH members through many countries around the world. So it's great to have you all involved in the webinar. So what is IOSH? So it's four things to the marketplace. So we're a professional body. So we are a charity, but we also hold a royal charter, and the royal charter is bestowed by the Privy Council, by the UK government, which sounds it sounds incredibly grand, but it just means for our stakeholders that they can be completely assured that we are the chartered body, and that there is that level of constitutional scrutiny that is in place for our stakeholders. We're a membership organisation, so as Andrew talked about at the start, 47,000 members and growing in 135 countries. And what's crucial at this point in time is that it is those members that are enabling the programs to take place as we've worked through the many phases, or the phases of COVID. So if I take an opportunity to thank you for all the great work that you've been doing. We're also an enabler to organisations. So we've already talked about the collaboration with the WTTC that we're developing, but we've also been working with collaboration with governments and regulators around the world and businesses to ensure we have the right standards in place to really drive positive improvements in safety and health. And we're a thought leader. So many of the services that I'll talk through shortly are underpinned by thought leadership and effective research and development to give you the confidence that they can support you moving forward. So really our response has been threefold and broken into three phases. The first of which was really about reducing the immediate transmission of the pandemic. The secondly was supporting people to return to work as quickly and as safely and as effectively as possible to enable us to get back to as much levels of productivity as that we're able to. And the third is around positive disruption and making sure that we build back better to ensure many of the positive disruptions that we've all encountered over the last few months can be born through into business as usual. So what have we been doing? So Andrew talked about this is the 13th webinar. So we've had a range of webinars on a range of subjects, and IOSH is very proud to be classed as an NGO by the United Nations agencies such as the ILO, the World Health Organization, and the International Social Security Association. And in partnership, what we've been able to do is to disseminate current and relevant advice to IOSH members and the wider community, and now to be able to offer that to WTTC stakeholders as well. And this enables those that are responsible, that have the vital role for delivering these programs throughout the world, to be able to do it. So what you have here is a range of guidance, a range of templates, a range of checklists that you will be able to access through the IOSH website. And I really would ask you to avail yourself of those and make use of those. So in terms of some of the subject matter that you will find on there, as demonstrated on the screen, it's guidance around how to ensure resilient supply chains, managing remote workers, workplace hygiene, preventative measures, and also how we can, as people have moved into the phase of working from home, how we make sure that they remain safe and healthy, and that their well-being is kept at the uppermost. So as we move into the returning phase and we take these first tentative steps back into the workplace, and we aim to focus on getting back to normal as much as possible and as productive as quickly as possible, our focus has been providing fresh advice to help people carry out effective risk assessments and update the ways they work in order to ensure that everyone stays safe, both societies and economies are able to recover. So if you go onto our website under Returning Safely, you will see a number of resources, and this is how we've categorized it into safe equipment, risk assessment, legal obligations, safe people, safe workplaces, and safe systems. So we believe these are the things that we're all trying to work through at the moment as we take those first tentative steps. Within there, you will find a range of free resources, including e-learning modules. And we've, in our first week of delivery of that e-learning module, more than 2,500 people have taken that and taken the advice and guidance that have been made available to them. More than 50,000 visits to the site, accessing these resources. So as we move into the final phase, or what we hope will be the final phase, is that this is around building back better, and there's much rhetoric around how we do that, and the new normal almost become a cliche now, hasn't it? That we talk about it. It's so often used, but it's absolutely correct. And I think never has there been such a razor focus on organisations' social purpose. We've absolutely realised, and COVID has put a shining light on the fact that when there is an existential threat to our species, that it's the safety and security of our staff, of our colleagues, of our families, of our communities that becomes uppermost in our minds. But really, that builds on a trajectory that was already in place. It builds on a trajectory that's been driven by investors and by communities and by our customers that really do expect us to put decent work, social purpose and safety at the heart of everything we do. And sustainability and safety and health professionals play a crucial role in doing that. So our model that we would like to share today is that the way we do this is by doing three things, and that organisations are effectively looking for assurance, and we do that by providing effective governance and leadership, that we put the right people and culture in place, and that they are operating with a consistently operationalized global system and process. And I'm sure through today we will all hear about operational systems and processes. So one of the tools that is available to safety professionals is our recently launched competence framework. And the focus of the competency framework is to make sure that there is the right knowledge, documented knowledge, skills and understanding and competence to keep safety and occupational health professionals at the top of their game. And what we increasingly see here is that this isn't about being technically strong and understanding all the risk assessments and the processes that we've talked about, but also being effective business professionals as well. So this is a key tool for our professionals moving forward. What we're also able to provide, and these are immediately available to organisations in the travel and tourism sector to help them build back better. And this is in relation to a variety of training products and training resources that help put in place that effective governance, effective management, and effective supply chain support as well. So these are all available for you, and that if you're able to access the IOSH website, you'll be able to find more. I've noticed that Andrew has come back into the screen, so I know he's now asking me to hurry up and finish off, so I will take that lead. Thank you all for the great work you do, and take you back to the chair.
Excellent. Thank you, Jonathan, and well picked up. Indeed, we want to try to keep to time. It's difficult, isn't it, with so many speakers and so many questions coming from the audience. Don't forget, you can raise your questions to any of the speakers by typing them into the Q&A box, and I'll share them with the speakers when we finish the session of all presentations. So I'd now like to welcome Mark Jordan from Tui Group and ask him to share his screen. Mark, welcome to you.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Thank you, Mark.
Hi, hello everybody. Thank you for giving me the time to speak today. So I'm just going to take you through very quickly, because I understand the time constraints as well, what TUI are doing in relation to colleague safety and customer safety, because the two are inherently linked, as you probably understand. So at TUI, we operate across 15 different source markets, 15 different countries, 5 airlines, 3 cruise lines, and obviously hundreds of destinations. So consistency in the approach for colleague and customer safety is challenging, to say the least. However, we believe we are uniquely positioned to build an end-to-end process that allows us to ensure that our customers and our colleagues are kept safe throughout the whole journey, from booking in the retail shop right through to their return flight home. I suppose the biggest challenge is in relation to destinations and the different legislation that we're facing into there, and the different requirements from from governments and local areas. You know, even places like Spain, there's different legislation, different approach in the islands than there is the mainland, so it's very challenging for us. But we've introduced a COVID-19 health and safety standard for retail, corporate offices, airline and hotels, which has been certified by an independent health and safety company, Intertech Crystal. We also work with a number of other companies such as Preverisk and SGS, all providing, you know, similar solutions. We've communicated that standard quite widely, and you may have seen me dropping posts on internet, on LinkedIn, for example, and we've also shared with unions and governments to give confidence to you know, not just our source markets, but also our destination markets, that we are safe and ready to return. And it's also being used as a marketing tool, as you can probably imagine. You know, customers are nervous about the future, so we want to give them confidence that, you know, we will return to travel as soon as possible. And actually, you know, our German operation started flying again last week, and we're hopeful to see Belgium and the Nordics in the coming weeks, and certainly the UK early to mid-July, pending government advice. So we are confident we can get customers abroad again soon. Lots of words on this slide that I'll summarise, but ultimately we are providing information and guidance pre-travel. So customers are receiving alerts via their app or emails or SMS messages to give them, you know, an understanding of what they should expect. Our colleagues are undergoing a huge raft of training, and that's from our retail shops, our airline colleagues, our destination teams, and our people in hotels. Obviously, we work with quite a lot of hotels that are not TUI hotels, they're third-party hotels that we contract. So we've had to really design a standard, and we've implemented this health and safety COVID-19 protocol for those hotels to follow as well. And we asked them to complete a very detailed checklist in relation to that. And I'll talk more about that in a little while. But ultimately, you know, we never knowingly offer a product or any service that you know, falls foul of our safety standards. And clearly, you know, when things do go wrong, as they always do, we try and work really hard to put them right. But this time it's more, we're working much more closely with governments and hotel associations and hotel chains to make sure that, you know, TUI can deliver that safe experience. So the four areas I'm going to speak about today, airline, hotels, resorts, transfers, and the main part for our colleagues, retail and office. So on the airlines, we've signed up to the IASA Charter, which I'm sure many of you have seen, but what it basically, the key points of that are to ensure that there's regular disinfecting and cleaning on the aircraft. The use of masks is mandatory for both passengers, but importantly colleagues as well. We're also required to wear other PPE where it's appropriate. So for example, aprons and lots more hand sanitizers. We're going to stop people queuing for toilets and ask customers as much as possible to stay in their seats. Now, clearly this is challenging. It's really, really challenging. And we already have great protocols around dealing with infectious disease on a flight, but we're retraining our staff in that and trying to give them the confidence to be sure that they know what they're doing. Clearly, and I won't talk too much about the airline piece, as it's covering next, but no, we are conscious about the pinch points at airports and local screening requirements, which will be very different in every single country. And one of the biggest challenges for the aviation industry is the turnaround. You know, some of the low-cost carriers really build their model around a quick turnaround. We have a little bit more flexibility at TUI because we don't have a 35-minute turnaround slot, but clearly that becomes a challenge. We've clearly looked at on board what our passengers require, what our crew require. We are making it mandatory for all passengers to wear masks, and we will supply a small amount of those where customers' masks get damaged or they don't have enough for the journey, because of course masks don't last forever. So we're asking customers to bring 2 or 3 masks for the flight, but if they need more and they run out, we can support. Customer social distancing is a big topic on the aircrafts, and evidence suggests it's not really a suitable option. So we are looking at making sure that we do use the other areas. We're reducing service on board, and we're making sure our colleagues know that they can't offer a full solution. We can't offer duty-free. But again, communicating to that customers is really important. You know, and always we're led by local legislation. In our hotels is probably where we've done the biggest piece of work internally. In our TUI branded properties, every hotel has to meet an independent inspection prior to opening. We're providing training to all our staff in those hotels, and that ranges from webinars to one-on-one training at the hotel. We're utilising third-party support for that as well. And as you'd expect, there will be amendments to the operation in those hotels. And our third-party portfolio, which is somewhere in the region of 13,000, 14,000 hotels, we're asking every single hotel to ensure that they complete a checklist for us. And that checklist is really important because it covers all those urgent and really time critical points around cleaning protocols, around how we're going to manage that customer journey. Certainly we're providing a lot of trained hotels, and we're providing that free of charge. It's been designed again by us and our partners at Crystal Intertech. But that's all available free of charge to any hotel in the world on our tuipartners.com website. And, you know, absolutely happy for anyone online to view that, to take that guidance. It is purely guidance, but we think it's useful. But we're going to continue to give that support to all of our hotels, partners or branded properties as and when needed. One of the biggest challenges has been the transfers and activities piece across the world, because legislation is so different, and we have to conform to that local authority legislation. That's really, really important, and we'll only sell those activities that are deemed, you know, appropriate. We're clearly offering PPE, hand sanitizer, we're doing extra cleaning, as you would imagine. And social distancing, again, you know, we're not asking social distance on the aeroplanes because it, you know, it isn't right, but on a bus that doesn't have the HEPA filters, for example, we are looking at how we can manage customer flow and customer volume. We're offering a change in our activities, smaller groups, more outdoor activities, and personal activities. For our colleagues, though, it's really important that we've really trained them in how they can keep themselves safe. So we're training them how to manage queues, how to manage face-to-face interaction, you know, pushing for cashless transactions that limits the touch time between customers and our colleagues. And a lot of that is ongoing, and we're still doing that as we roll out, you know, Europe first, and we're looking to the long-haul destinations. And finally, the biggest challenge has been our offices. Legislation across the globe differs greatly, even in the European nations. So, for example, in Germany, the workers' councils have deemed that whilst it is advice from the government that colleagues must wear face coverings, the workers' councils have deemed it's required. So we're having to source those and supply those in our offices overseas. In the UK, it's not quite the same. Colleagues will be asked to wear masks. Clearly, we've done full risk assessments as in line with the government instruction in the UK, but actually I deem that to be the appropriate level of action to take across our business. So we're looking at risk assessments in all our offices and all our retails to ensure that we keep safe distancing, we have appropriate signage, we keep that, you know, that feel of work alive, but promoting home working where it's possible, and we all know the virtual world has made a big difference. And obviously, as you'd expect, loads of extra cleaning, loads of focus on colleagues, and offering that additional support to colleagues that if they can't work or they feel vulnerable, we'll support them as best we can. It's been a huge challenge. We've you know, 70,000 colleagues and, you know, over 25 million customers per annum, but we think we've hit it about right, and we've met the needs of each of our markets and, you know, and our destinations. Happy to take questions at the end, but thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mark. Really appreciate your presentation and the real world insights that you've given us. Now, let's please welcome Arlette Anderson, who, as well as a leading EHS for Gatwick Airport, she's also a member of IOSH's Performance Development Committee, which supports IOSH's Board of Trustees on a range of important matters affecting our members. Arlette, please share your screen.
So, hello everybody, and greetings to whatever time zone you are dialing in from. First of all, thank you to Dr. Andrew Sharman for that introduction, and also to IOSH to join this panel of speakers this afternoon. What I'm going to do is share, correctly, there we go, share Gatwick's experience in adapting to the pandemic, with a particular focus on occupational health and safety professionals in their leadership in this crisis. I should start by saying that many of you will be very familiar with the crisis the aviation sector is currently in. You personally, or you may know somebody as well, that their livelihood may be at threat as well, by the almost daily job losses that are being announced, not just in aviation, but wider there. So what I want to do is let me start you on our journey so far through the crisis, and begin with the great foundations that Gatwick has. So I am going to share this picture. Some of you may have seen this picture as you as you come down to land or take off from Gatwick Airport. Let me start with a bit of history. 1936, Gatwick began its life commercially flying to Paris by British Airways. From 1939 to 1945, World War II, we had to close the airport to support the war effort. And in 1956, we had to close again to build the new London airport, Gatwick Airport. 1958, the Queen officially opened the new Gatwick, which was the South Terminal. And then she was back again in 1988, opening our North Terminal. And now we find ourselves in, well, it was 2009, Gatwick was sold to a consortium that was led by Global Infrastructure Partners. And now also we have a new investor, Vancy Airports as well, which are just over 50% of our interests. So over 60 years, passenger numbers for us pre-pandemic were over 46 million, 230 destinations, over 70 different countries. We have over 50 different airline operators, of which TUI we hope to welcome back, hopefully mid-July, flying. We are predominantly a leisure flying industry. We also were one of the first airports to have a mainline train station. So in terms of our sustainability performance, we are leading the way there. You'll notice we have one runway on the left-hand side of the photograph. What you see in the middle there is our standby runway. And the length of that single runway is 3,316 meters. As I can personally say, as I've walked it in its entirety, doing a night inspection of the runway, which we obviously do very regularly. We do hold the world record for the number of air traffic movements per hour on that single runway. And as I've mentioned, we've got 2 terminals. And the reason why I'm mentioning all of these issues is that in terms of the pandemic, there are a number of measures that we've had to introduce. So let me just take you through some of those. 119 stands with 186 centre lines. Currently, we've probably got about 120, 130 aircraft parked up at the moment. 245 check-in desks, 123 self-service check-in desks, and 119 baggage drop facilities. 140 retail, catering and foreign exchange, 38 restaurants, coffee shop, bars, and 24,000 people work on the Gatwick campus in 250 different organisations. We currently employ about 3,500 people directly, and more importantly is around the role that we play for the UK and in government in particular. We directly generate 1.6 billion for the UK economy. So before I move on to some of our direct measures that we've had to introduce, I will just say as well that Gatwick Airport has seen a number and has seen through a number of crises already. If we look at the flooding that Gatwick had back in 2006, we look at the drone incidents that we've had recently as well, whereby we shut for 4 days. We look at SARS, we look at MERS, and also the ash cloud. So we've got through these pandemics so far. However, this is a bit different for us. So this is a bit of a journey on through the pandemic. And I think really for us, the most significant thing for us is around our passenger volume drop. You'll see our passenger volumes compared to this time last year have dropped by 99.8%. Pre-lockdown, we worked very closely with Public Health England. Also, then the Foreign and Commonwealth Office directed some advice around travel for British citizens. But the key point for us is that we remained open throughout the pandemic because it was critically important for the government, for us, to ensure that we could enable repatriation flights, but also some cargo as well. During the lockdown, obviously March time, we had to really take some decisive business decisions in terms of how we were going to operate our business going forward. We consolidated our operations into the South Terminal. We shut our North Terminal completely, and we operated from only a short period of time, window, in terms of how we could enable those flights to happen. 90% of our staff are on furlough. All of our staff have had to take an 80% pay cut. Oh, sorry, they're on 80% pay at this moment. We have also introduced special severance measures, whereby we've seen over 700 members of our staff sadly leave the business. But what was important to us, and the role that we have played as an executive team, is to make sure that we can set up, make sure we've got all the measures in place, but set up effective reconnecting opportunities and opening up our airport once again to flying and to passengers. So I think for us, it did put us into hibernation, but not all operations. And I think particularly sort of February, March time, this was where I felt the role of the Health and Safety Executive and IOSH was really helpful in supporting the role that the OSH professionals, occupational safety and health professionals, played in outlining some of the measures that were required to take businesses forward, to ensure passenger health, but also staff health in this pandemic. As I move forward in terms of our journey so far, what we are doing is we are now looking to restore confidence. We are reacting or responding to what the UK government wants us to do, and we have implemented over 260 different measures in our airport operations to protect passengers and staff. I'd like to move on. We have been subject to multiple guidance. It's not just guidance, it's protocols, it's assurance. We have had to pick our way through what is required for us as an organisation to operate safely, to provide that reassurance, not just in the UK, but on a global passenger basis as well. This is a range of the measures that we've had to implement as an organisation. So this is essentially 3 core measures which occupational health and safety professionals will have that full understanding of a principle of hierarchy of measures in which to implement in the organisation. So I don't want to give you examples or pictures of these in particular, but these are the range of measures we have had to implement across our whole operations to ensure passenger and staff health. But as I said, it starts, all the guidance and all the regulations start at those 3 key pillars around social distancing, cleaning, respiratory and hand hygiene. That is supported by a robust understanding of risk assessment, whether that's to ensure the health and safety of passengers travelling through our airport, but also our staff as well. And then what we have done is implement a series of measures across, as I've mentioned, across our airport operations. You'll see I've highlighted 2 areas there that have impacted us quite significantly in terms of the advice that passengers have in terms of the confidence to be able to travel, whether that's the Foreign and Commonwealth Office or whether the implementation of the UK government of the quarantine measure to prevent the 2nd wave of the virus on the 8th of June. That is also, we are working very closely with the government around that about what we can do to reassure passengers and staff in returning to work, but also using our airport as well.
Sorry to interrupt you here, Arlette. We need to close now. So if I could just ask you to give you a couple of words in closing summary, please. Yes,
so I'd like to finish off with the information that's available to our travelling passengers is on our website. And there is a video that shows a little bit about the measures that we have implemented as an airport there, which will be available on the slides that are going to be shared following this presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Arlette, for showing how commercial aviation is rising to the challenge. Certainly a difficult one, as you say. Travel is down 99.98% this year, thanks to the pandemic. What a challenge. So finally, it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Mark Parrish from International SOS. IOSH has collaborated a number of times now with International SOS on promoting safer business travel. Mark, I'm looking forward to hearing from you. Go ahead and please share your screen now.
Great, thanks, Andrew. Hello, everybody. Mark Parrish is my name. Very nice to speak with you. I thought I'd talk a little bit about returning to travel. Some of you may know us. We do a bit of work in the travel world as well as other parts of businesses, but maybe just a little bit about where we are. This shows, let's say, a graphical depiction of the pandemic curve. What we've done is we have overlaid on the peak of the curve and a possible second wave what you as organizations, businesses, industries, companies, whatever you are, what you might like to be doing as we all move through this pandemic. So we're now, certainly for most of us probably on this call, we are on the recovery phase of the first wave of the pandemic. The question is whether we'll get a second peak in that wave or whether we'll have a period when we have no cases and then we move on to a second wave. But now we're on this return to operations. What have we learnt? How are we going to get back to some sort of normality? And we've heard a lot about that with the previous speakers. When we look at, from a healthcare perspective, what we need to do to get back to travel, it's always worthwhile underlying this, thinking about what we know about that virus. Because when we apply what we know about the virus to the precautions that we put in place, it makes things a little bit more logical. So we know the virus is transmitted predominantly by close contact with individuals. They're in contact between 1 and 2 meters, depending which country you might be in at the moment, for maybe 15 minutes or more. So that's why we see social distancing coming into place. That's why we see discussions around the use of masks and where we might use masks. And that's where we see the request to wash our hands regularly, because we know that gets rid of the virus. So if you translate that into the travel industry, what we are seeing, and we work with a vast number of organizations in the travel industry, the majority of the world's airlines, private aviation, private maritime, a number of hotel and other travel groups. Domestic travel is picking up a little bit quicker than international travel. International travel will come. So if we look at domestic travel, as previous speakers have said, we're looking at some social distancing on the airline and a variety of other things before we go to the airport, when we're there, when we get onto the plane. That will be mirrored in international travel. The challenge with international travel is that it's a longer flight and there are a few more things to sort out. But let's just think about how we might see things in the next 6 months or so. You may get a questionnaire from your airline before you travel, which asks you to fill in a number of details. And on that, they may make a decision that you're fit or maybe not fit to fly. When you get to the airport, you may have some form of screening, maybe move towards some testing of some sort in the future, depending where we end up with our understanding of testing for asymptomatic individuals. You'll probably need to wear a mask. You're probably going to have maybe a temperature screen, maybe another questionnaire. You'll need to check your bags and carry less of them on. When you're on the plane, you won't be able to move around very much. You may have to book in to go to the lavatory. There may be some one-way system, if possible, for the flight crew to get around. That might be difficult. There'll be some space, or there'll be more space on the plane. Maybe that's a good thing. Probably less in-flight service, as we heard. When you get to the other end, you may have a whole load of other checks and balances for you, and there may be some restrictions in those countries. So, for instance, here's me. I'm an Aussie. If I want to go home to Australia, I know I'm going to spend 2 weeks in a hotel room in Sydney before I can get out, and I won't be allowed out of that hotel room for anything, not for exercise, not for fresh air. All my food will be brought to me. At the end of 2 weeks, I can get out. Build that into your travel plans. We'll also see these gradually introduction, I think, of air bridges. So in the things that we have been working with, here's a couple of examples. We've been collaborating with quite a few hotel groups, Four Seasons and others, helping them assess their organizations and make sure that they are, how would we say, COVID risk-free. And that includes walking around establishments, reviewing their policies and protocols and procedures, giving them some advice as how they might want to put in place a low-risk COVID experience when you're going into those hotels. On the airport side of the things, we're doing some temperature screening for some airlines at the moment. We're talking with airlines and organizations about testing. I think we'll see a little bit more of that coming in. And that will all give us a reasonably good idea of how we can decrease the risk of COVID to be, you know, as low as practical. We're never going to get rid of COVID. We just have to accept that. Let's make sure we decrease it to as low as possible. Other things, though, let's think about some other things about COVID, which I think is just as important, other than, let's say, the direct impacts of travel. Mental health, big impact on mental health, COVID, whether you're a traveler or not. If you've been locked up in some sort of restrictions or some sort of quarantine for the last month, 2 or 3, that will impact you. If you have an underlying mental health issue, it's probably going to make it worse. Even if you don't, it may have an issue. Fake news, there's a lot of that about. 5,000 likes on a social media page saying that garlic is a good treatment for COVID is not evidence-based scientific research. Steer clear of it. Go to good places where you can get your information. Our website is one of them, WHO, your local country's website, all fact-based. Make sure you have a good communication plan with your employees that builds on that. And don't forget, COVID is not the only health risk out there. Other health things have not gone away. So it's not, you're not going to have a heart attack. You still may have a heart attack. Don't forget that. Balance the risk when you're traveling, because in some parts of the world, the risk of other disease is going to be as big as, if not higher, than COVID. We're providing some support for this with our various assistance centers and call centers, but just have that in mind and don't get too focused on COVID, which a lot of us are doing. Here's a little slide about some of the things that we can help with if necessary. We've certainly done lots of these in the travel industry, whether it's from assessment and advisory to look at your plans and regulations and protocols and give you some advice on that, and particularly make sure they're up to date with local country regulations, because as we heard and we see all the time, those local country regulations are changing regularly. So you may have a plan, but you want to make sure it's up to date and appropriate for those local countries. If you need training, we're doing quite a lot of that in a variety of languages, webinars, support to staff, ensuring that you have PPE, people to do testing, people to do screening, medical support. All of this is the stuff that we are seeing in the travel industry, as we are seeing in every other organization as they return to some sort of normal. So we'll get back there. We'll have some sort of normal. It won't be quite how we had 6 months ago, but I still see quite a bright future for the travel industry over time. That's all from me, Andrew. I'm happy to take questions. You're on mute, Andrew.
Super. Thanks, Mark. I had big thumb fever there. Couldn't quite get the button in time. Mark, thanks for coming in a minute early. That means we've got an extra minute for questions. The questions have been pouring thick and fast into the Q&A box. If you haven't yet got your question in, now's the time for you as participants to offer your questions to the panel. Use the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen. You can write your question in directly. Also, keep an eye on the tab marked answered in the Q&A box, and you'll find lots of questions that our panelists have already been writing answers to. You may find that there's something in there that's of use to you too. So let's ask all our speakers to start their videos back up again and unmute, and we'll get the questions going. I suspect the first one might be good for Mark Jordan from TUI. It's from Ian Durber, who says, hey, 2 passengers recently carried COVID-19 on a UK flight to New Zealand. Can international air travel ever be declared safe for the public? Mark Jordan, what's your take on that?
I mean, there's absolutely no evidence to suggest that an infection has ever been spread on board a plane. So it is likely that these passengers contracted the illness in the UK before they travelled. So I don't think it's fair to say that the aircraft or the flight was the cause of the problem. What actually happened in New Zealand is that the authorities didn't follow their own guidance around quarantine and testing. So it's a really difficult question to answer. I'm not sure I can say that aircraft travel will ever be safe because you know, no one knows that. But actually, filters on the aircraft, you know, refresh the air every 2 or 3 minutes. So ultimately, you know, it is fresh air that you're breathing, and we are introducing other things such as face coverings and face masks. So difficult one to answer, but ultimately my view is we are doing everything we can to limit spread of infection on board, and we need to follow those regulations elsewhere.
Thank you, Mark. Dr. Mark Parrish, you hinted there about you returning to Australia potentially at some point in the future and the quarantine that you would have to go through. Do you want to make an addition to that question there? Will air travel ever be declared safe? Is it possible?
It depends how you define safe, isn't it, Andrew? I think we all have to accept that there's a level of risk to everything that we do. Crossing the road has inherent dangers. Air travel is incredibly safe. I think if you think about COVID, the vast majority of us who get COVID will have an unpleasant cough and a cold and have to stay at home for 10 to 14 days and will not require admission to hospital. There are some of us who, because we're in a vulnerable category, are slightly at higher risk of that. And I think we should take that into account, whether we are traveling and want to be careful of COVID or want to be careful of many other things. So I think we should put all this stuff in perspective. 400,000 people a year die every year from malaria. It doesn't hit the headlines because it happens in sub-Saharan Africa, but it's a risk. We deal with 6 people every year or so who have died from malaria in their travel there. Completely preventable disease. So let's balance that risk. Sure, there's a slight risk of flying. There's a slight risk of doing everything. Make sure individually that you've done your own little risk assessment and you're comfortable that what you're going to do is the right thing for you.
And this is one of the most important points for us to remember, isn't it, as part of the pandemic, that, and you've alluded to it, that we also have an infodemic running at the same time with lots of fake news, lots of sensationalism going on. Tiffany Mizrahi, what's your take on how we really stay focused on the most important aspects of health and safety with regard to travel and tourism?
I honestly think it's about continuous communication that's clear and sticking to common messages that align. I think, it's about figuring out what are the main things we need to focus on to keep people safe. The idea of saying that people should take garlic or drink sanitizing gels, etc., I think takes away from the main issues. I think ultimately the whole industry wants to keep people safe. And so it's about having alignment between the public and private sector, working with international organizations, industry associations, and experts group, and making sure that the same messages are repeated over and over again, realizing though that that the situation is rapidly evolving and that we will need to adapt whatever procedures we're putting in place now to lower risk contexts. So we're not saying that what we're putting in place now, whether it's for airlines, whether it's for hospitality companies, is forever. The idea is to say in high risk context, you behave in a certain way. As the risk context change, we need to monitor and adapt and make sure that the policies that we're putting in place actually do enable business continuity as well.
Good. Okay. Let's get Mark Jordan and Mark Parrish back again. There's a lot of questions around wearing masks on planes. So gentlemen, if you could perhaps help me tackle some of these. The general consensus amongst many participants is, hey, if wearing a mask is safe for a long flight, does it mean then that airlines don't have to adhere to a 2-meter social distancing on board? And other questions around, what about when we're eating? Of course, if you serve meals at the same time on a flight, as is common in the past, that means everybody removes their masks at the same time. And what about people with breathing difficulties? Will they have to wear masks on flights too? So three big questions kind of indicating some of the feelings that are going on amongst participants. Let's start with Mark Jordan at TUI.
So the IATA guidelines are pretty clear and are online for everyone to view, but ultimately there isn't a requirement to social distance on an aircraft, mainly because of the HEPA filters that are used to clean and refresh the air and the way the air circulates in an aircraft. There is a requirement, however, to wear face coverings, so to try and mitigate that risk. So you can't solve every risk. If you were to impose a 2-meter social distancing on an aircraft, you'd be operating at a load factor of around, well, probably less than 30%, which just isn't practical. The plane, it's not worth the plane taking off. So we need to look at other mitigation measures, and that's what we're doing. So we're making sure customers are aware if they're ill or feel symptoms, they do not travel to the airport. A lot of airports are introducing temperature checks. I don't know if Gatwick is, but perhaps I'll let say no. But some airlines are, and some carriers are. There is going to be a different way to load the aircraft, and we're using other measures. Eating is a challenge, yes, but again, eating, you tend to be looking forward in your own area, eating your food, and as soon as you finish your food, you'll be asked to put your mask back on. But again, even food is going to be pre-packaged food, to reduce the level of contamination risk. So a lot of other mitigation measures being taken to substitute the need for social distancing.
Just while I've got you there, Mark, what about sanitising aircraft? How's that going to happen? Will that change moving forward?
Yeah, so every aircraft during its turnaround will be cleaned by the crew, wearing PPE, so they will clean the touch point areas. And every day, at least once every 24-hour period, all our aircraft will be deep clean sanitised with the, you've probably seen the hazmat spray suits, and they go on the aircraft and clean the whole plane with a sort of a spray. That's being done regularly.
Thank you. Let me bring Dr. Mark Parrish from International SOS in here. Helen O'Halloran asks, Dr. Mark Parrish, what if they're not symptomatic during the time of travel? What do we do about these passengers showing no symptoms?
Yeah, we know there is some asymptomatic spread of infection, and we can't avoid that. And again, it comes back to what Mark was saying, is just decreasing the risk as much as possible. And I always like to think of this as a layered approach to managing COVID. You know, one particular thing by itself is not particularly useful. A range of them all together is. So masks, for instance, are good, and we've changed our policy on masks in the last couple of months, haven't we? Don't forget to wash your hands. That social distancing is useful. It's fine if you don't have it on an aircraft for a certain length of time, because as Mark said, the filtration is very good. Other things, there was a question about, you know, if I have breathing difficulties, should I be traveling with COVID? Well, I think that's a discussion for you to have with your GP, because if you have breathing difficulties, then whether it's COVID or anything else, there may be a risk to you traveling on an aircraft where, you know, the partial pressure of oxygen is lower than it is you know, at ground level. So again, it's for us, it's to make a decision on those things, but always go back to what we know about that virus. General spread is within close contact of people for 15 minutes by droplets that have been coughed out from people that are symptomatic. That's the majority of way it's transmitted.
So is your advice there, Mark, to just have very short interactions and try to be away from people within a few minutes?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And so it's just, can you keep your interactions, if you're very close to them, then maybe try and limit that. Do stay that 1 or 2 meter distance, whatever your local government is deciding it is at the moment. And this all depends, of course, again, on the incidence and the risk of COVID in the country that you are leaving and the country that maybe that you're going to as well. If you're leaving a country where they have COVID under control, and that magic R number is very low, then the likelihood of you contracting it remains low in the first place. Putting all the other things in place just decreases that risk.
Super. Let's get Arlette Anderson here. Arlette, you're based at a huge international, in fact, global aviation hub, Gatwick Airport. What does all this mean in terms of public confidence? The participants are wondering how long the aviation industry can survive without the return of public confidence. You said 99.9% of travellers down so far this year as a result of the pandemic. Is there going to be a resurgence of airline travel later in the year? Are you predicting an amazing winter, given that summertime, it sounds like people are going to be staying at home?
Well, we hope to pick up some of the late summer traffic, but that is dependent on those airlines wanting to operate out of Gatwick. Obviously, we're very hopeful for Tui that they will be operating from Gatwick. Hopefully by a certain date. I may know that, yeah. But we do hear the latest stories from British Airways and Norwegian Air around the schedules that they are putting on, whether that's necessarily starting up with the same extent or starting up with a spike in travel again. So we are hopeful, and we've put in a range of measures to assure, but it is a question on whether those airlines can operate with the passenger demand going forward. I think for us though, just as an airport.
I'm going to try to rush through because we've still got 14 more questions and only 3 minutes left on time. So I'm going to try to get some short answers. There's several people now asking about ISO 45001 certification. Does the panel think that 45001 certification might increase customer and employee confidence in the travel and tourism industry?
My view is no. I mean, what we all have already is a number of safety management systems in place. We manage safety effectively, and we have done for years. Introducing the ISO certification on the back of COVID-19 doesn't seem practical really, and it seems to be a little bit of a knee-jerk. We have great standards in place already, so I would say no, because our standards are good enough.
I would agree.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Arlette. Good for some agreement there. We've got a little poll that we want to ask participants. We're going to pop it up on the screen just now while we continue with the last couple of questions. So when the poll flashes up, please go ahead and give us your feedback. Just click whichever button you agree with most and submit your feedback to us. Thank you. Anne Lovell has a great question here. I'm going to pose it to Dr. Mark Parrish at International SOS. Mark, whilst you're a medical doctor, you will of course know that it's good practice in occupational safety and health to hold the handrail when we're walking up and down staircases. So how should we mitigate the spread of the virus on stairways and escalator use, given that we want people to hold handrails when we're using these things? Any thoughts there?
Andrew, fantastic question, because only last week we visited a site, a very large warehouse, where they had a lot of handrails and staircases with exactly this issue. And we commented, you've got lots of signs saying hold the handrail, but the top and bottom of the handrail, you've got nothing for people to, let's say, sanitize their hands. So sanitize at the top and bottom, and make sure that your cleaning staff keep cleaning those handrails, and focus on handrails and high touch points with cleaning staff rather than the floors and the carpets. That's less of an issue these days.
Fantastic, thank you. I guess I want to just push back as one of the final questions here. This one's from Daniel Bouchier. As we're seeing more and more that people are not showing symptoms and there's a decrease of raised temperature in many cases, will people start moving away from reliance on temperature screening and focus on other symptoms? Arlette Anderson, what do you think is likely to happen there at Gatwick Airport?
Yeah, so I think for us, the advice from the government, the Department of Transport, have said that the science behind the temperature checks for travelling passengers isn't necessarily there. So we are looking to adapt. Should an airline want us to do that, we're able to do that. But all too often you get caught up in personal data and that kind of thing, which several of my colleagues at Heathrow and Manchester Airport Group are currently looking at therefore. But I think it is a measure, but not a reliable measure, and that is what the UK government is saying for us at the moment.
Thank you.
Andrew, just something for me, because we do quite a lot of temperature screening. I quite agree with Arlette. There's no science behind it. It's really iffy. But it does reinforce the message. That's what's so key. And it does make people more aware, oh, hang on, maybe I shouldn't go because I'm not feeling very good and I might be picked up at that temperature screening. That's a really important point.
I want to bring Tiffany Mizrahi in for the final question. When we think about summertime, some of our favorite destinations, Dominican Republic, Mauritius, these fantastically idyllic paradises. Tiffany Mizrahi at the WTTC, what can destinations do to help themselves here? We've talked about planes and airports and transportation sector hubs. What about the destinations themselves? Is there something that these places can be thinking of?
Destinations have been and have, like Mauritius, actually created protocols to actually enhance consumer confidence, create that trust, but also work with the private sector and local attractions, that hotels, that the whole destination is actually ready to welcome travelers. So there's a lot that can be done, and a lot that many of them are doing. And if they can't, and by the way, if they can't get tourists internationally because skies aren't open and borders the way they wish, they should kick it off with domestic travel.
Excellent. Thank you. We are out of time. I allowed us to have an extra 10 minutes there to get as many questions as we could. Still a lot of questions to be answered. I know that some of our speakers are already tapping away at the keyboards to answer as many more questions as they can before we sign off in just a minute. So while they do that, let me thank our speakers for some great presentations today, and also to thank each of you for attending and participating in this session. I'd like to also remind you that IOSH has a stack of resources on our coronavirus 19 resources page with lots of advice and guidance. This and links to the World Health Organization resources, plus the replay of this webinar, plus the slide decks that you've seen from our presenters today. So you'll get a link to the recording of this email and to those resource pages as well, following over the next day or two, as well as finding the information that's on the screen now with that download location. So in the meantime, as I mentioned earlier, remember this series of webinars takes place every Thursday. So keep an eye on our COVID-19 webinars page and other IOSH channels for details about the next webinar. I'm grateful for you all joining and taking part. Please take care and stay healthy. Thank you. I wish you a great day. Bye-bye for now.
Thank you. Bye.